Okay, so YouTube mangled my first video, so hopefully this will upload better. So this is how I knit my socks. All of my socks, I use this loom, which is a Knit UK 44 peg loom. I buy the one that comes without the pegs added in already, because that way you get pink pegs, so I can then put them in 2 pink, 2 blue, repeating all the way around. That just makes it a lot easier if you're doing any kinds of patterns, and also for the cuff. I use a knit 2 purl 2 or a 2x2 cuff pattern, so that way when I am doing the cuff of my sock I don't need to think about it. And also if you're doing a pattern it's way easier to keep track if you don't just have a sea of blue pegs, and it's a little bit cheaper to buy them without having the pegs put in as well. And you can pull these out and change them just using like a hammer or your fingers, depending on whether you fancy ruining your fingers for a few hours. So my loom has a couple of these stitch markers. I've pulled a couple out here. Hopefully you can see them. They look like this. They're little knitting markers in different colours. So I have one here at the start of my loom, right by where your anchoring point is, and then I have a different colour halfway down the peg, halfway down the loom, so that I know where my front and back is. Because my memory isn't very good and I'm a big fan of making things super simple, I have stuck some washi tape on the back side of my loom so that as soon as I look at it I know that this is the front and this is the back. That comes in really useful for the heel and the toe, because where you whether or not you want the ridge of the toe will determine where you put your heel. So to explain what I mean, here is my sock that I have recently finished. This is the top side, so this is the front for me, and then this here, where there's this little depression, that is the seam of the toe that we're going to do today, which is a Kitchener toe. So I prefer to have this ridge on the sole of my foot, so I know that I want the toe to be done on this half of my loom without the tape, and I want the heel to be on the half with the tape. This toe, while it does look pretty clean and not particularly noticeable, there is a slight ridge which I will show you. I can turn this inside out, excuse all the ends, I have literally just finished one of these. So you can see here there is this ridge where the toe is. It's slightly raised. In my experience I've made about 20 pairs now. After a couple of wears this does go flat pretty much, or pretty flat. It's not very noticeable, so I prefer to have it on the bottom of my foot, because one, it will flatten out quicker that way because it's obviously got your body weight on it, and two, it just means that the top of your toe looks a bit cleaner and nicer, because who really looks at the sole of your foot? If you are worried that that might be irritating, you can just make this the top, in which case your heel would be here at the top here as opposed to at the bottom here. But when you're doing your toe, it doesn't actually matter what side you choose, just as long as you're consistent for the heel. You don't want to end up having a heel one way and the heel on the other. If you're picky, that would bother me. Maybe it wouldn't bother you. Apart from these 2 stitch markers and my washi tape, I also have a row counter. This one is a sports tally counter, I think. I think they're used for golf or like bouncers or anything that you need to keep a number on. I really like them because it's really easy to just click with your thumb. It's very hard to accidentally do it too many times, and even if you or your baby knocks it to the floor, you will not lose your row count, and it doesn't forget like the electric ones. So that's why I use this one. And I also use these little sewing clips because with the kitchen attire you end up with this waste yarn like here. Hopefully you can see this. So it just helps to kind of clip it out of the way when you close up the toe, because you'll do that while still working on your sock. So I'm just using some regular 4-ply. This is a Drops. I really like them. It's like £2.20 a ball, and I can get a pair of size 8 socks out of one ball pretty much. So I'm a big fan. So you're just gonna pull off your yarn, find the starting bit, and we're going to put this on. Just to say, I am doing a pair of socks for my mum. They are going to be 2 colour socks. You don't have to use 2 colours. In fact, I don't think I started using 2 colours until I made my 4th pair. But I find that unless I'm using like a striping yarn, a plain 1 coloured sock with no pattern is kind of boring, so I'm just going to add in a little bit of striping so it's a little bit more interesting for me. So you'll see how to change colours and how to do some striping that doesn't jog, hopefully. Okay, so to start off you want about 6-ish inches of yarn, and you're just going to wrap it around your anchoring peg like this, as much as you want. You can use a slip knot to anchor it, which technically is a bit more secure, but I don't like it. You have less adjustments, and also it means I have to undo it, and as I've already said, anything that saves me a little bit of brain power is good. The next thing you want to do is decide which way round you want to knit. So I am right-handed, which means I want to knit counterclockwise, so this way. If you're left-handed, or you just think you might want to knit clockwise, which is this way. That will change the way you start your Kitchener, but if you do it backwards, it's a really easy fix, and I have done it backwards before, and it's no big deal, and no one will ever notice. If you're knitting counterclockwise, which is the way I'm going to knit, this green marked peg here is your first peg, this peg here is your last peg. If you're going the other way around, so if you're going clockwise, this is your last peg, this is your first peg. It only makes a difference for this beginning bit. What you want to do is you want to start by wrapping around your last peg, like this. So, sorry, I'm just trying to like show you which one's the last peg. So you want to wrap it around your last peg and then go in front of your first peg, like that, and then behind your pegs and in front of your next peg, and then behind and in front. I'm just going to turn this because I know my hands kind of get in the way a little bit, makes it a bit tricky to see, but you basically wrap it up and down in like a sort of zigzaggy S shape. So you go up and then down over the back to the front and just wrap to the front of the peg and then behind them all and to the back. So as I get into the middle, you'll be able to see a bit easier. So you just wrap your pegs up and down, doing like a sort of S-shaped zigzag as you go, pulling out any more yarn that you need as you need. You want to kind of hold your loose yarn down with your thumb or fingers while you do this, unless you've done a slip knot, in which case it will hold itself. But yeah, don't let go if you're anchoring yarn, just in case. If you've wrapped it enough, it shouldn't come off, but it's a pain if you have to start doing it again. So just still wrapping up and down like this until you get to your last peg. And I'm really wishing my mum had chosen a colour other than blue to show you guys, because blue on blue is not the clearest. If you can't see, please blame my mum. Hopefully when I do the white that will also make it a bit easier. So just finishing off my wrapping like so. And the way you can check if you've done your kitchen alright is the yarn should kind of want to go the way, when you wrap it over, it should want to go the way that you want to knit round. As I said, if you do it wrong, it's really not a big deal and you can fix it almost straight away. Just makes your life a little bit easier if you get it the right way. Then once you have wrapped it, you want to just push your yarn loops down. That will help hold it a little bit, because right now it's not secure, it's just a piece of yarn that's been wiggled up and down. So now we're gonna lock it into place. This will hold it down. So what you're gonna do is, you've got the one that isn't technically wrapped, so you want to go over that one as if you're going to wrap it, but you also want to go over to the next one and bring the loop up so it's up the top. The sock that I'm knitting that I prefer to do is going to be knit using the U-knit stitch. There's a couple of knit stitches. There is the E-wrap stitch or the E-wrap knit stitch, which is useless for socks if you want to wear them in shoes. In my opinion, it's just too big. There is the true knit stitch, which is pretty much identical to a knit stitch. Actually, they're all pretty much identical except the E-wrap knit. But there is the true knit, which is formed in the same kind of way you would do it with a needle. There is the U-stitch, which is what I'm going to do, and there is the flat stitch. The flat stitch will give you a slightly tighter stitch, but it can be a bit of a pain with your tension, and it can hurt your hands. And having made one sock of a pair using a flat and one sock using a U, there wasn't enough difference and it annoyed me too much, so we're going to use a U-stitch. To do that, you literally just put the yarn round so it kind of makes a U, and then just get your other loop from the bottom and you just lift it over, and you're always going to be lifting loops over to do your knits. So bring it there to the front, to the back, and lift over. I apologise to those of you that know how to do this stitch. But if you've never loomed it before, I figured I should probably tell you what the stitch is that I'm using. So you're just going to do your U-wrap all the way around. So you do that one at a time, and you just wrap your U over and lift. You might find that as you get to the middle, particularly on the second side, your strands will get a little bit loose and floopy. To fix that, all you have to do is just poke your thumb underneath and then bend it so you're holding the loops down. That will just add a bit of tension on there and kind of hold them in place. But just go slowly and you should be fine. And if you mess it up, it's only yarn, which is basically string, and it's super easy to redo. So just you knit all the way around. I'm just gonna pause and catch up, and then we'll meet when we're all the way around. Oh, and I nearly forgot actually, so I'm still going. With your very first stitch that you wrapped, you might find that it's kind of too tight to knit like this. You can see mine's really tight, which is another reason why I don't like using a slip knot, because then you can just pull apart your anchor yarn, hold on to it still with your thumb, but like not super tightly, lift it over so you've got that space, then just wrap it back up. Keep holding on to it because it's not anchored in place yet, and keep going round. Okay, so I've almost gone all the way around. It's another reason why marking is really handy, because you can see that this stitch has been knitted and this stitch hasn't, because I know where we started was right at that marked stitch there. So we're now going to knit that pink one that's next to the marker, and now your Kitchener stitches are locked in place and they are not going to come apart. Everything is knitted and locked, and we're basically just going to ignore this half of the yarn for the beginning, and we're going to do the toe, which is a short row wrap and turn toe. I don't know if that's its proper name, but that's the best way to describe it. So now that you've done this one, instead of carrying on round in a circle, we're going to go backwards this way. So instead of bringing your round here, you're just going to bring it behind the peg that you have just knit, which is this pink one, and in front of the pink one that's next to it. Again, another reason why it's really nice to have different coloured pegs. And then you just knit backwards the way you just were. And we're just going to knit up until the peg before the marker to show that it's our start. Hopefully you can see what I'm doing. Like this. Okay, so we've just knit the peg before. We would normally just knit this one, but it's a wrap and turn, so we're gonna use this to make our kind of toady creases, because right now we're right where this join is on the sock, and we need to shrink that toe down, and then we flip over and make it big again. It will all make sense, I promise. So you're now going to wrap around it as if you were going to knit. So wrap and then bring it in front of this peg here. So wrap as if you were going to knit, go between those two pink pegs, and then wrap it behind that second pink peg, kind of like another like zigzag backwards S thing, and then you knit pink, blue, and you're going to knit back this way. So we're just knitting backwards. Like this. And just keep going. And then we're going to again stop one stitch before that marked stitch. Oh, 2 stitches, sorry, because that marked stitch is the halfway point. So these 2 pink stitches next to the marked stitch, we're going to do the first pink stitch, and then we're going to wrap and turn the second pink stitch and go backwards again. And you're going to keep wrapping and turning until you have 7 stitches by each side of your marker. So we're going to wrap and turn this pink stitch here now and go, and you'll know you've done your wrap and turns because you'll have 2 loops rather than 1. So 2 there, 2 there. So keep wrapping and turning and doing your stitches until you have 7 on this side, and then you'll have 8 in the middle with just 1, and then 7 on this side. I will catch you up when we're about to do our last wrap and turn, so keep going and I'll be there. Okay, so I'm almost done with my wrap and turns. I've got 1 more on each side to do. So this is my last wrap and turn on this side. You see I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and I'm just going to go back and do my last one on that side, and then half of your toe is done. One thing I did want to say about the Kitchener is, as you hopefully saw, it does waste a bit of yarn. To minimise your yarn wastage, just wrapping and turning this last one here, you can either pull out a lot more yarn, and then you can use what you cut off once you've sewn up one sock to start the next sock, if you're organised. I choose not to do that for two reasons. One, I tend to use a lot of self-striping yarns, and it's a pain matching the stripes if you do that. And two, it can be a bit fiddly, and cumbersome having like a lot of yarn that kind of just dangles down here for the whole of your first sock, but that is an option. So, you know, if you're doing lots of plain yarns or speckled yarns or yarns where it doesn't really matter if they match, or if you don't mind if they don't match, then you can do that. But I don't really find that the 2 grams of wastage is really huge, and I always keep it because the wrap and turn heel can leave you a slightly gappy toe. You can see here where the wrap and turn is, you can see that the stitch is a little bit gappy. For my first kind of 5 pairs of socks, I just left it and I wore it, and that was fine. Because I use a 75 wool 25 nylon, it's fine, it just like felts in a little bit anyway, fills up, no issues at all. What I do tend to do now though, because I have this extra yarn, is I sew this in at the end. If it would be helpful, I'll show you how to sew it in, but it's pretty self-explanatory if you've ever sewn anything before. Anyway, back to this. So this is my last wrap and turn. So I've got 2, 4, 6, 7 now. And now all we're going to do is the exact same thing but in reverse. So we're going to knit straight over, and we are going to go to the first wrap and turn, or you've got 2, and you're going to knit those over just like it was just one. You're going to treat them the same. Like that. So you can knit them 2 at a time like I do. I find that using the U-stitch is loose enough that you can do that, or you can knit them 1 at a time, which I'll show you how to do when we go around to the next one. So once you've knit that first wrap and turn, you're just going to go back and do the next one. Hopefully that's in focus. Sorry, I have a baby on my lap, she just woke up. So this one where there's 2, so as I said, you can just knit them in 1, it's pretty loose enough to pick them up, or if that's a bit tricky, you can do 1 and then 2. It's exactly the same. So just like we were going, we're just going back and forth. So once you've knit your double loop wrap and turn, you're going to bring the yarn in front and keep going until you take them all off. As you knit your wrapped stitches, you might notice that because, I'm sorry my camera cut off, hopefully you didn't lose too much of me doing the wrap and turns. I was saying, as you wrap and turn, they can sometimes kind of pop up, but that's not an issue. You can just sew that up at the end or leave it. Your feet will basically smush them in and you won't really notice. You can also leave one of the wraps and turns on each side. That can help if you get holes. I find that is more likely with the heel than the toe. Don't find it makes any difference with the toe, so I pick up all 14 wrapped and turned stitches, so 7 for each side of the toe. So this here is the last wrap and toe turn, so you can see that one on that side is back to looking the same all the way around, and we're just going to go and pick up these 2 here. And then once you have picked up this one, you're gonna work it all the way around, like so. You can see I'm being a little bit slower. You can see that the loops are much looser on this side. Now, as for row counting, this would count as kind of a half row, so I don't tend to count it as a row when I'm counting my rows. I'm quite lazy. I know how many rows of a yarn will give me my length that I need for my foot, so I use the same formula. If you want to do the same, then I suggest you pick whether or not you will count it and then kind of try and stick to that. But at the end of the day, like 1 row difference really doesn't make a difference. If you find that your loops are getting too loose and pulling up, you can just pull them down by putting your thumb in and bending back, as I said. If you choose to do a contrast toe, like in the one that I showed you, that has a contrast yellow mustard toe, although I will admit it's quite a subtle contrast. Personally for me, I make my toe, which is here, so we're kind of right underneath this depression here, and then I do another 5 rounds, and then that whole piece is my toe. I find that if I start changing colour here, so only this bit where like my thumbs are is the toe, just this section, it looks really weird. You need your toe a bit bigger, I think, to make it look nice. So now you've gone round once, you can start doing the super easy bit for ages until you put in your heel basically, and you just go round and round in a circle. You can keep a note either using a row counter, which is what I recommend, because again, anything that makes it really easy is a big win in my book, or you can add a stitch marker in, with like a light bulb stitch marker or a safety pin or something every few rows. This is just to show you kind of the underside, so you would put your rows here. This does look loose and weird, I promise it will fix itself. I will be back showing you how I work on more of the foot in another video, because my phone's getting a bit grumpy, but don't mind the ball that just went flying. You basically just go round and around until you have kind of enough knitting hanging out the bottom that you can close the toe, and then you can measure to see where you want to put your foot. You can do it a few ways. You can draw around your foot on a bit of cardboard, or measure it with a measuring tape or a ruler, and then kind of stick the ruler in this bit until it comes up to where you want to put your heel in. You can measure this bit, find out how many rows you're doing in an inch or a centimetre or whatever you want to measure your foot in, and then roughly about an inch or 2 or an inch and a half or 2.5 to 3 centimetres before the heel, before the foot hits the heel on the actual foot, if that makes sense. So if your heel is here, then you want to kind of start making your heel here. So there's about an inch and a half, which is really useful if you're making socks for someone else and you don't have their foot available. You can Google like size whatever knitting sock measurement, and it will tell you what that foot measurement is. Or you can do it the way I do it if I'm making my own socks or for someone that is in front of me, and you can just, once you've closed up the toe, put your foot in this loom, and then if this is your heel again, like where your wrist is, once it kind of goes to about there, you've got about an inch, you are good to put your heel in. That is the easiest way, in my opinion. It works fine for my feet. I'm a size 8, so I don't have particularly dainty feet, and mine fit in there just fine and don't get stuck. So you can do it that way. But as I was saying, you can see I'm kind of holding it down with my thumb just to keep those bits taut. You won't need to do this in a few rows time, it will just hold itself taut. But until then you can do that. This can now be completely unwound if you want to. It can annoy me a little bit when it hangs over, so I sometimes just kind of stick the yarn, I stick my hook in underneath, wrap it around like that, and then kind of pull it down out the way, and then it stays locked out of your way so you don't accidentally knit it in. So just keep going around. I've come back round to my starter meg, so I just click in that I've done one row and I keep going. As I said, I'm going to add some striping in because they're for my mum. I'm going to put some stripes in, so I'll show you how to do jogless stripes. If you want to do that, if you're just sticking with one colour, you're not changing yarns, then just keep going. And I will hopefully do another video very soon showing you how to close up the toe, finish the leg and put the heel in.